Tim, you're taking minutes today, right?
I am.
Do you have everything you need?
I do, I believe, yeah. Yeah. Does taking the minutes mean that I'm also gonna be like doing roll call, walking us through the agenda? I assume?
That's me, yeah,
Cool, that's what I figured.
yeah, that's like purely in chair responsibilities.
Awesome,
You just gotta write down what people are saying,
perfect. I can-
and if we vote on something, you have to record the vote.
Mhm. I can do that. Thank you.
Okay, so we're sitting at the members panels.
Hi, folks on Zoom, can you hear me? Maybe give me a thumbs up if you can. Okay, thanks, Barbara. We're gonna get 2 minutes, right on schedule. Maybe, if we have forums, oh gosh. Said you something. One more person. Oh,
Do we count city staff as members? I don't remember.
they are ex officio, so we do not
For
count
quorum,
them.
they are members, or no?
But if you're counting,
Oh.
you're not counting the full 20, no.
We have 20 non-ex officio members.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Is Brad still planning to come?
Yeah, he'll be joining remotely.
Oh,
So we're missing some names on the member list. Is there, on the screen is just 18.
oh. Oh.
Look at that.
She.
Hey, Brad.
Okay, Barrett, I just said you're joining remotely. I'm sorry.
The other one.
A little more comfortable in this room than in our offices.
Oh, sounds good, Carol.
If let me change any display to something now, or I can project it so it's a bit easier for folks to see. Like each system you go to, it's always a little bit different display.
Yeah. How do you guys feel in the room? Can you see, okay, just look good?
Yeah.
Good about it?
Okay, cool. Just let me know if you all need me to change it.
Awesome. Well, let's get started. Because we have quorum, and that's great. Welcome to the June meeting of the Pedestrian and Transit Advisory Committee. I'm so excited that this is my first meeting with all of our new members. I'm so sorry I couldn't make it last month, but really grateful to Vitor for chairing while I was gone. Let's start with our roll call. I'm gonna just go through our members and then our ex officio members and then our guests. And I'll explain a little bit more of what will happen with the guests when we get there. But for now, please just say here or some version thereof when I say your name. Ted Alexander, he's not here today, he called me. Junie Alverson. Caroline Bodiger. Meredith Brown. Laura Evans. Steve. Yeah. Christopher Ferry.
Here.
Tim Gilman.
Here,
Preston Gutelius.
present.
Sotoko Harada. Brenda Marvin.
Here.
Steve Mulder.
Here. Hello.
Hello. Barbara Myers.
Here.
Bianca Norkunis. I got an email from Bianca, so I don't think she's coming. Vitor Pamplona.
Here.
Zach Rosenberg.
Here.
Alessandra Seger, myself. Harold Bugaris.
Here.
And on to our ex officio members. The esteemed Councillor Willem Baugh, who is not here. Kate White.
Here.
And Justin Schreiber, who is also not with us. Our guests, I see that we have 2 guests on Zoom. So when we get there, I will ask you to Well, you'll see a little pop-up on your screen that'll ask you to unmute, and then you'll click that button and just tell us your name, your ward, and why you are joining tonight. And then Brad will get you after that. Let's start with Karen.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, Karen Malloy with SAS, Somerville Alliance for Safe Streets. I live in Ward 5, and I'm here this evening to both find out about the Elm Street parking pilot and to hear the discussion about PTAC's McGrath Boulevard letter.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. Yes, and Karen also was very instrumental in writing another very wonderful letter about McGrath. So very glad to have you here. Next up, I see Mark Levy on the screen.
Oh, sorry.
Other one then? What's that?
Mark, you should be able to unmute now if you can.
That's okay, Mark. We'll record your attendance. How about Joel Paul?
Hi, yeah, I'm Joel Paul. I live in Ward 4 and just interested in what's going on. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Joel. And Era, I see you on the screen. I think you joined before I explained how the guests would work, but I'm sure you've introduced yourself before. So would you just say who you are and maybe your ward and why you're here?
Sure. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
This is Era Shore. I'm in Ward 6 and I've been to a few meetings before and I'm excited to be here tonight. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. I think those are all our virtual participants, so I would love to invite Brad to introduce himself.
Thanks, Chair. Hi, everybody. My name is Brad Rawson. I serve our city as Director of Mobility in Mayor Valentine's office. I'm part of the amazing team that Kate is a part of, that Justin Schreiber is a part of, and we serve as your liaisons, your staff support for the Pedestrian and Transit Advisory Committee. I'm a Somerville resident. I'm a parent in our public schools. I'm a almost 17-year veteran of our organization. And I thought it was important tonight to come over and just say a big intentional thank you to all of you, whether you're veteran members of the committee like Vitor, like Zach, like Alessandra, or whether you are newer members like Barbara and Tim and so many others. Thank you for volunteering. This community runs on people power. It runs on volunteerism. That's how we identify and execute our progressive agenda. I was trained long ago by veterans like Karen Malloy from Somerville Transportation Equity Partnership, who's here as a guest tonight, who talked to me in 2007 and 2009, et cetera, about what it was like fighting the good fight, organizing people for progressive, people-centered streets, for responsible, equitable, smart growth centered around mass transit, for making sure that we don't think about transportation for transportation's sake, but because it connects people to opportunity, because it helps us address the climate crisis, because it helps us mitigate the lasting impacts of structural racism that we see in our built environment every day. So the mayor can't be here tonight. We've got budget hearings going on, but she is very aware of particularly our new members volunteering and the recruitment process. And she's asked me, Brad, get on my calendar, get on my calendar. I want to come say hello and thank you to our committees. Well, she can't do that tonight. So I'm here on her behalf, but also because it's our team that's doing the work with you every month. I need to go back to City Hall, so I won't mess up your agenda. You got a packed one. And I also want to note that the officers at PTAC are an incredible group who do agenda management, both in partnership with the city, but also independently. You all have this really special opportunity and responsibility to have one foot in the world of city government. You are special municipal employees. You do ethics trainings. You abide by open meeting law. And yet you are also the conscience on our shoulder. Although Kate and I are Somerville residents and we are experiencing challenges and opportunities just like the rest of you, there are certain things that you all in your personal lives and your social networks experience every day. I think about my friend Carol, who's gone through so much in the school world. She and I saw each other at kid camp yesterday. Like, we are all in this together. And I want to make sure that as our new members in particular are thinking about how to serve in this role, you know that it's okay to behave as an activist, but just remember, like our veteran members, you're an activist on the inside, but you're not alone, because our staff then can behave that way too. So really looking forward to working with you all in the years ahead, not just tonight, not just this month, not just this year. Change is hard, it takes forever. It is really controversial. It turns us old before our time. And yet our staff draw energy and inspiration from you all. Steve, I'm sorry, I should have recognized you as well. You, like Karen, were one of the folks who were kind of training me as I was coming up here in Somerville. So again, I really hope that your volunteerism here at PTAC helps you connect the dots and know that the flame still burns strong here in Somerville activism. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank you, Brad. We couldn't do it without you and the wonderful people in mobility. We're always learning from you guys so much. Cool. Let's talk about the May minutes. Does anybody have anything to say about them? Anything you want to change? Great. Seeing nothing, I motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
This is Victor, I second the motion.
Thank you, Vitor. All in favor of approving the May minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
I,
Anyone opposed? Okay, minutes pass. On to subcommittee updates briefly. Did policy and enforcement meet this month?
No,
Great, thank you, Meredith.
but also I would like to put out a call for new leadership because I'm obviously too busy right now in this particular moment in my life. So if any of the new members or any of the veteran members would like to step up, I think it'd be great to start meeting regularly again.
Thank you, Meredith. Yes, and actually, we're going to talk in our final agenda item tonight about rethinking our subcommittees. So, if policy and enforcement is something that we want to maintain as a subcommittee, cool. I think we should definitely get new leadership for that. And thank you so much for serving as at the helm of that subcommittee for a number of years now. But if it's not, then that's fine too. Whatever we think will best serve our needs and goals. Did engineering and evaluation meet this month?
No, we did not. And I'll also echo Meredith's point. I'm looking forward to hearing about everyone's ideas and the directions that they want to take the subcommittees in.
Awesome, thanks, Zach. And also for your leadership on engineering as well. And we will be discussing a letter that Zach and the rest of the engineering committee put together a little bit on. Education engagement. Ted usually gives these updates because I don't want to be the one speaking constantly. But we are the two people who make up the education and engagement subcommittee. And we met on June 4th. We debriefed a very successful tabling at Carnival, such a fun event. Many other new members were there tabling with us, which I really, really appreciate. We got several new signups for the newsletter. We had a lot of really good conversations with folks who were asking about both specific streets, but just generally about kind of what's happening in Somerville. And we tabled with our friends in mobility. So it's always a really nice partnership. We also just discussed a few more outreach events for the rest of the summer. We're not going to do Art Beat because we're out of town, and it's also a really long event. It's from like 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. So it's just kind of a big ask. So we think that our next outreach opportunity is probably going to be in September. We're thinking about doing the Gilman Square Art and Music Festival. Also thinking about maybe another community walk somewhere down the line. So keep your eyes out for those opportunities. And that's subcommittee updates. Moving on to our draft letters. There are two draft letters that we are talking about today. One is on McGrath Boulevard, and the other is on the West Broadway reconstruction. McGrath Boulevard is a state level project being pursued in very close collaboration with the city, whereas West Broadway is a city project. I think at this point, I just want to share my screen to just high level walk through the letters. Maybe we can take them one by one, actually. I'm assuming that folks have looked at them, but just for just to make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page. So McGrath Boulevard, this project at a high level is to completely redesign McGrath Highway and turn it from a highway into an at-grade boulevard that is safe and comfortable for people of all modes and ages and abilities to traverse. This is a project long time in the making, and hopefully it will be set to start sometime in the next, 3 or 4 years. We'll see. But so this letter basically thanks Mass DOT for pursuing this project and expresses our pure excitement to see it come to fruition. It talks about why this project is really important in terms of reconnecting our community that is, torn apart from this highway, and creating a safer corridor in line with our Vision Zero goals, and reducing the negative environmental impact of a urban highway. And it calls out some things that we're really excited to see in the concept design, including continuous sidewalks, protected intersections, new pedestrian crossings, floating bus stops, some dedicated bus infrastructure for those bus stops, and a lot more green space. But we have a few kind of key things that we want to advocate for. Kind of the big one is the number of lanes. The concept design still includes 4 motor vehicle lanes for the entire corridor, which we think is still quite wide. So we are encouraging Mass DOT to narrow the right of way even further. We also would like to see the median removed to allow more space on the sides of the road for green space and trees so that pedestrians and cyclists can get the benefit of that shade. But also, medians, there's kind of some different perspectives on them. We are taking the perspective, at least in this letter, that having the median will reduce friction for drivers, a sense of friction, and actually encourage them to go faster. So we would rather that median be replaced by pedestrian refuge islands at very short distances along the corridor. In terms of bus infrastructure, we want to see more service along the corridor, which is not, necessarily a Mass DOT decision, but they are talking to the MBTA certainly as part of this project. But we do want to see some dedicated bus lanes. There's already dedicated bus infrastructure around the stops, but we are calling for kind of pie in the sky, center running bus lanes down the entire corridor to connect all the way to Broadway, which already has dedicated bus lanes. In terms of the sidewalk experience, we want to see wider sidewalks. This 12 feet width comes from NACTO, which is the National Association for City Transportation Officials. Yes. Anyway, so that's where it comes from. And they are the organization that kind of our mobility team tends to follow for their design guidance. The Otis Street overpass. Yes, such a discussion. We are taking the position in this letter that we, in an ideal world, would like to see the overpass come down because we would like people to just be able to cross the street safely without having to take a detour. And because it's likely that they are going to have to reconstruct the footbridge if they don't tear it down just because it's crumbling. Maybe not crumbling, but it's not well maintained and it's old. And if they do that, then they would probably have to eat into some of the park that is next to one of the sides of the overpass. So we don't like that. But we really, really want to make sure that any crossing that they put there, because it serves so many kids, is going to be safe. So would like to see it go away, but only if we can have like a guarantee that it'll be a really safe crossing. And then finally, we're just expressing support for the bike infrastructure that's planned on McGrath, even though this is explicitly not a bike committee. We have a bike committee, they are our allies and our friends, but we are just supporting the bike infrastructure while also noting that we want to see clear marking and accessibility features between the pedestrian infrastructure and the bike infrastructure. And that is the letter. Does anybody have comments on the letter? Anything they would want to see changed? Any questions? I'm gonna open it up first to PTAC members, and then if any guests who are here tonight want to comment, they are more than welcome to. Yes, I see Meredith.
Hey, yeah, I have the most minor feedback. I've overall really love this letter. I love the content, and everything about it. Just since this is addressed to MassDOT, I'm not completely sure that they would be necessarily aware of the Winter Hill Edgerly situation. So it might just be good to have a couple words around that to contextualize, like Winter Hill School to temporary location at Edgerly or something, whatever. But otherwise, love it. Thank you so much for putting it together.
That's a good thought. Thank you so much, Meredith. Yes, Steve, go ahead.
Oh, and my goal to unmute, I'm failing the technology. Hi, everybody. New member, I just want to say kudos to the authors of this. I think it's really comprehensive and really thoughtful. I've been sort of involved and aware of McGrath and project for a long time. This feels like it's a really crystallized and well thought out strategy for feedback. In particular, kudos for really thinking through the pedestrian crossing, the refuges, and sort of the danger of the median, I think, in a lot of ways. So I really appreciate that section in particular.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. Yes, and this is the brainchild of many, many people, including many people who are on this call tonight. So thank you so much.
A comment, which I don't know much about, like these letters and how they should look in terms of, how things should, but for the Otis Street section, it struck me that the first sentence is, we would like to see the Otis Street pedestrian overpass removed. And I'm worried that like somebody at MassDOT will read this and be like, done.
Yeah.
Without like reading all the other things that are in there about like, however, like with these other things that might happen or not happen. So just like worried about like, maybe like highlighting the correct things or like using bold or italics or other ways to emphasize things if you don't want to rewrite things.
Great point.
So for this project, is like the street lights are in scope, or is it something that's considered outside of it? Cause like, if like there's a section on McGrath where the light is really bad, right? Yeah, and I noticed there was one note in here that was like, it should be better illuminated, but I was like, I think it's a big problem. I hope if there's an opportunity, like, elaborate on it, I think that'll be helpful, cause like, that entire area between Target and that car dealership needs to be like way better.
So are you envisioning, great comment, are you envisioning that would be just like a, I don't know, a more explicit section in?
I don't
like,
think it needs to be a section, but like,
sidewalk
yeah, like just make sure that we write something there other than, or elaborate on just the illuminating comment, right? Like that entire area needs, one for people safety, but also because there's a ton of rats. So, yeah, cool.
Anything else from our members?
Just a newbie process question.
Yeah.
When these letters are generated, especially to a completely separate organization like the DOT, what is the process about what happens? So this letter gets sent, they have a certain amount of time in which they respond. You get a response, we get a response.
Wow, that is so optimistic.
Newbie optimism.
No, it's great. What will usually happen is that we'll send the letter. We typically will get mobility's input on who is kind of the best email to send it to. And sometimes we've gotten responses, mostly from city councilors, is kind of the most likely body to respond. But I don't want to downplay like the impact that these letters have, because they are going directly to the project teams who have a dedication to incorporating community feedback and responses, especially if that feedback is coming from kind of multiple channels, right? So like this is hardly the only letter that is being sent to Mass DOT. It's just one among many that they're taking quite seriously. And we've seen like demonstrable impacts on previous projects and other processes based on our letters. So I don't want to downplay like that we are making an impact even if someone doesn't reply.
But it may not be quite as tangible as seeing something specific. Or getting a specific reply.
Yeah, and we'll try to like call out if like, say we send a letter about like the budget, for example, we'll try to call out like if something gets in the budget and we've advocated for it, just to like kind of track those small wins.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think at this point, I'll open it up to non-members if anybody would like to comment. Yes, Karen, go ahead.
Hi, I would like to just say this is an awesome letter. I think it's fabulous and your points are all really great. I might just mention something since someone else brought up about the Otis Street overpass. I agree with what the earlier comment said about not starting off about removing the overpass since we already know they're gonna do it. So maybe like just taking what you say here about the safety of this crossing is vital, and maybe just expanding on that. I mean, it's not just, it's there, in addition to school children going to school, there's a playground there, and safety for everybody is really, so I just wanted to, agree with what somebody said earlier and just kind of, sort of add to that.
That's all. Thank you.
And then one other comment to the last question, I can just tell you from SAS, we sent our letter like, like a month or 6 weeks ago, and we haven't heard anything. And I will say from past experience that it kind of varies with Mass DOT. Sometimes you get a form response, saying, thank you for your comments, blah, 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 something like that. But we got nada on our letter, so.
And you guys asked for a meeting with the secretary, right?
We did. We ideally it would have been great to hear from her, but we didn't expect that. So, but anyway, just thought I'd mention that. Anyway, it's a really great letter that PTAC has.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Karen. And you guys had a really fantastic letter too. Era, I'm gonna go to Carol in the room really quick, and then we'll get to you in a second.
My question is actually on the Otis Street overpass, and I apologize because I was kind of on my way here while listening in on the discussion. Well, maybe I shouldn't put my distracted side with the record, in addition to talking about whether or not it's maintained, I'm trying to read it right now, but also the timing. I think even with recognizing it may need to come down, just like during the period of construction, if they can keep it in place for until the last possible moment, so that the time between when it comes down and when it actually is just a safe at grade crossing. So talking about also like that, a lot of people really rely on that crossing. So if, for example, it comes down first and over the entire period of construction, there's just no way to cross that street. That would be, so thinking about not just what the ultimate outcome is with that crossing, but maintaining it for as long as possible. I think could be worth adding.
Absolutely. Era.
Hi. First of all, I wanted to correct Karen. We did receive a form response from MassDOT that our letter had been received. So not quite nothing, but pretty close to nothing. I just wanted to echo that this is an amazing letter. The coalition that SAS pulled together is very broad. It encompasses safe streets and housing and green space and abutters. And, our letter was quite broad because of that constituency. So it's wonderful to see PTAC diving in with a bunch of details. And of course, when you send this and when we all hear back from MassDOT, we look forward to collaborating with you on this. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Era. And I do just want to point out that we explicitly call out your guys' letter. Our requested changes are largely aligned with those of the coalition from whom you received a letter last month, because they are. It's true. And we always love collaborating with you guys and aligning with them. Okay, I'm not seeing any additional discussion unless Brad wants to say something.
Thanks, Alessandra. I'm gonna need to step back to City Hall. So quickly, let me again kind of compliment the team that wrote this letter for doing your homework, crafting things in a strident but professional and diplomatic manner. This is exactly the kind of advocacy that has helped Somerville Transportation Equity Partnership, Friends of the Community Path, so many others over the years. So bravo. In terms of what to expect next, This stuff matters, even when it feels like it's getting filed into the void. There are project managers, staff, and consultants who read all of these communications. They read and catalog and respond to every public comment in a public meeting like we had back in February. And ultimately, this is part of the record. It helps our staff ultimately do the translation and do the engagement with them. There was a question earlier about who gets copied. So Alessandra, you mentioned our great city council. That's one component. Our great state delegation is another. Obviously, the mayor and the staff here, when visible copies like that do help us all continue to do the follow-up, to seek additional meetings, technical feedback, and honestly, opportunities for additional public engagement. There was an informal public meeting in advance of a 25% design, which we expect to be delivered about 6 months from now. Organizations like Mass DOT are managing a historic amount of capital investment right now. And they probably don't have enough people to do this stuff quite the way any of us want or expect. They should be here around this table at some point with you all. That's what I would do if I was project manager or senior manager at that organization. So keep asking, stay engaged, and let's try to continue to partner with DOT and say, yes, we want this investment. And we know that they could be investing it in 350 other cities and towns. We need to remember that Somerville is a very, very small component of any state agency's responsibilities. So we want to respect folks, but we also want to address the historic injustices that put this freeway in our community, which never should have been put here. Okay. Thanks again, everybody. Be safe, be well.
Thank you, Brad. Good luck at council. All right, I think for this letter, since it seems like there is broad support for it, some requested changes, I am gonna propose that we send the letter pending the changes. The changes will not be brought to another meeting. It will just be assumed that they are made. But once I send the letter, I will send that email to all of you so you can see the evidence that the changes were indeed made. Do I have a second to that proposal?
Aye.
Thanks, Tim. All in favor of sending this letter with requested changes as discussed tonight to Mass DOT, please say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Anyone opposed? Abstentions? Okay, great. Thank you all so much. Our next letter is going to be on the West Broadway reconstruction project. Zach, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you were the main author of this letter. Do you feel comfortable walking through it a little bit?
Sure. Give it a try. Let's see. So I think the kind of the broad stroke of the letter and in the earlier paragraphs is just expressing our general support for the direction of the changes and a lot of the specific changes like the crosswalk improvements and bump outs, lane shifts, all things that we generally like to see. We call out a couple of things that are suggestions from us. So the fact that Teal Square is out of project scope, but we ask that transit signal priority for that area be considered. Just a comment that we ask that bus stops include benches and shelters, and based on our discussion, ask to investigate a textural design feature to delineate between the sidewalk and the sidewalk level bike lanes to make that that space more clear. During our discussion, we didn't quite get to solid preferences for, I think, either of the design concepts, but my interpretation was that we kind of had a slight preference for concept one in both cases. So that's what we have in the letter. We also asked that the city do some more research to look into the kind of raised block option and see if there's any information that they have to determine if a long raised block would slow cars like we might want. Couple of other notes that Peel Square is not a great intersection, and in the future we would like to see work happen there as well. But we acknowledge that it's not included in this design. I think that's about it. You want to add anything I missed?
No,
Context?
that was perfect. Thank you so much, Zach. Any questions, comments, requested changes from our PTAC members? Yes, Christopher.
I was down in Union this past weekend, or I hadn't been for a while, and I was kind of surprised by the difference for some of the textural changes and markers they have around the raised bike lane there. And I wasn't sure if the city had any documentation, because it seemed like there were several different treatments, whether it was this sort of the ADA sort of nubbled crossings like you get at pavements like you get at crossings or on T stations. There were also some more raised sort of like humps, sort of letting you know and where those were being used, and if there was a standards guide or any measures of how successful or not successful those have been seen. I was very glad to see them, and that the city has that in their playbook, in their available resources, which is good. I just feel like maybe the letter could say, treatments as seen in Union Square, or, treatments reflecting lessons learned from similar treatments being installed in Union Square.
Cool. That's a great observation. Anyone else? Any non-members want to comment on this letter? Yes, I see Joel.
Yeah, I was actually at Union Square today. I was working at one of the new buildings, and to echo that last comment, there's like kind of like a half step down from the sidewalk to the bike lane, and then like a full curb height difference from the bike lane to the road, and that kind of thing really helps like delineate it, where when the bike lane and the sidewalk are the same height, people often wander between the two, and it's hard to get through on either bike or foot.
Cool. Yes, we can definitely have that. Okay, seeing no additional discussion, this letter, I think we really just need to send it to mobility. Unless you feel like it'd be helpful to send it to council, but I feel like those are the ones making the decisions here.
Absolutely up to you all. I mean, we do read them and respond, so totally happy for you to send that, and it will also be included in the reporting for this phase of West Broadway, which will be available and published on the project website.
Awesome, thank you, Kate. So I motion that we send it to mobility. Do we have a second? All in favor? Oh.
You can choose who's second to you.
No, you can. Carol is second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, awesome. Oh, and thank you, Joel, for the additional note. 10 Prospect Street, awesome. Put that in the comments. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing, and I think that, oh, we're right on time. Okay, we're gonna move to our next agenda item, which is gonna be a presentation from Kate about it's a city update on the Elm Street parking pilot.
Thanks, Alessandra, and thanks everyone again. I know I presented last time. You will see other mobility members present. I just happen to be on both of these projects and attend, so it's really easy for me to come and share it with you. But again, my name is Kate White. I'm both your staff liaison, but I'm a planner in the mobility division. And tonight I wanted to talk to you all, wanted to talk to you all about a parking regulation pilot proposal. And I know it sounds kind of funny. It's not a big quick build project. It's not a reconstruction project, but it's a critical pedestrian and transit safety concern of the city that we have been trying to think through what are the ways that we can make improvements in the short term. And so we put together a proposal and we wanted to share it with you and get your feedback, get your thoughts and ideas. And again, it doesn't have to be just around this. We can have a larger discussion around this type of issue, but wanted to bring it to you all this evening. So really quickly, you know, if you frequent this street, you're probably well aware, but the purpose of these regulation change requests, we want to encourage safe and legal parking on Elm Street, specifically between Day Street and Grove Street. So this is that 2-block part of Elm, right in the heart of Davis Square. We see an incredibly high demand of quick pickup and drop off, especially for food takeout. And so we're trying to think through how do the regulations maybe meet that demand, but really with an eye to safety. We are also looking to increase the number of accessible spaces. For some of our new members, the city embarked upon a citywide parking and curb use study a couple of years ago. And one of the goals was to increase the number of accessible spaces, particularly in our commercial area. And then provide adequate space for large truck loading and unloading, which may not always be our goal in a lot of our streets, but there's a significant amount on this stretch of Elm, and there is no designated spot for that. But like I said, at the heart of all of this is increased safety for all users, especially people using the crosswalks. And I'll get into a little bit more later on. For current parking regulations, we have such a mix in this 2-block. And I'm gonna use this time, if it's okay, to just do a little educating on our specific parking regulations, as you may not be like me, who gets really in the weeds about them all day, every day. So I'm gonna go from the west side to the east side. Starting at the west side, this is by your mics and where Oath used to be. We have a selection of meter spaces. There's approximately 6 on the north side, 6 on the south side. We provided this PDF to you all right before the meeting, so feel free to dig into a little bit more, but I'm just going to walk us through the types of regulations. Metered spaces in the city of Somerville, if they're on street, allow you to park for up to 2 hours, and obviously they're paid. Then moving east on the north side, this is right in front of Foundry, we have a loading zone. Loading zones in the city of Somerville, you are allowed to park for 20 minutes if you have a commercial vehicle. So it's anywhere from your box trucks, but it could also be any kind of commercial vehicle that has a commercial license plate. And it's 20 minutes, but if it's still active loading, the space is being used for what it is, and that's not something the parking control officers would tell someone to move being actively used for loading. One interesting thing about our loading zones, which it can be different from some of our surrounding communities, is they can use for 5-minute passenger pickup and drop off. So if you want to run into Diesel, grab a quick cup of coffee, you can actually park legally in that loading zone for up to 5 minutes. This is because we've just seen such a growth in that type of use of the curb. And so when it's not being used for commercial loading, we want it to be used for some of these types of facilities. Or sorry, these uses. Continuing past Chester Street, so that's where Be Fresh used to be, you know, soon to be H-Mart. We actually have, which is uncommon in our city, 30-minute spaces. These were put here a very long time ago, kind of because McKinnon sits right there. 30-minute spaces are actually very challenging to regulate. Because for a piece, or I don't use the term PCO, which is parking control officer, for them to check it, they have to pass it and ensure that they come back and check it after 30 minutes. So if their route takes them further, or that no matter what, even if they came by and they were by in 10 minutes again, they have to wait the full 30 minutes. So someone can sometimes be parked there for a couple of hours, and unless the PCOs come by and really checked it on those 30-minute marks, it can be really challenging for that turnover, which is why we moved to more like that 5-minute quick pickup. It's much easier to enforce. Continuing east, we have 4 meters and then we get to Day Street. So that's right in front of Dragon Pizza and then the Goodwill right across the street. So I'm gonna hop to the south side and move west. We have 4 meters. We then have an accessible space that's right up against a quite short bus stop. This bus stop is used by close to 6 routes. The 94 passes it, but it doesn't always quite service it because it's finishing its route. But you have your 89, your 88, your 87, your 96. And I have it on another slide, which is the last one. And as we continue, we have a dedicated space past Chester Street for rideshare. This is where Lyft and Ubers are supposed to drop their passengers. We have found that not to be as successful as it has been in the past, and they are choosing to just drop wherever their passengers want to be dropped. We have 2 more meters, and then we move to what is called a time-limited loading zone. So essentially, instead of being 24 hours a day, it's currently from 7 AM to 5 PM, and it now moves to a taxi stand, which is actually expired. Taxi stands, are a partnership with taxi companies, and there's a license for it, and it's not been operational for the last 2 years. So it is a not usable regulation currently on this stretch. And then as we continue through, we have 6 more meters. So that's just some context. I'm happy to pause for questions at any time when we move through the presentation, whatever works well for folks.
Why don't we pause briefly for questions?
Yeah, on the regulations. Anyone have any questions?
Yes, Steve.
Yeah, could you, I may have missed, could you talk about the enforcement differences between the 5-minute and the 30-minute a little more? Like why is 5-minute easier to enforce? I agree with it in principle. I just want to make sure I understand it.
No, that's a great question. So in 5-minute, if you imagine a PCO has their kind of route on their, they have routes designated, so that they monitor for each shift. With the loading zone, for this stretch, they could cover the square and easily come back through in a short period of time and double check if that loading zone is still being like either not legally used or if it's in like legal use. With 30-minute, they just have to ensure that they have waited that full 30 minutes. So they might have caught the vehicle, 15 minutes in, 30 minutes in, an hour into staying there, and then they have to ensure that they come back again after 30 minutes, which may not be exactly 30 minutes, it may be 45 to an hour, just depending on how else they have to cover. And days
Got it.
where it can just change. Oh, sorry.
No, understood. That totally makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
I have a question. Was it sort of the idea also that the rideshare pickup and drop off would be used by like Grubhub and people like that as well? People were running into a restaurant quickly and grabbing food to then go and deliver it?
Originally, no, it was specifically just for passenger pickup and drop off.
Okay.
Originally, a couple of years ago, there was a partnership with Lyft and Uber that helped us say this is designated pickup space. So if someone booked their vehicle or their rideshare, it would tell them to go there, or same with drop off.
Okay.
You would be dropped off there instead of maybe right in front of the theater. And that actually worked for a chunk of time. We've just seen it be far less effective more recently. And when I say that, like in the last year or two.
No, because I would just say with all the restaurants there, I'm sure that there are a lot of these people double parking and running in.
Yeah.
Kind of regarding the restaurants, is it only certain types of parking that restaurants or businesses can turn into outdoor dining? Or is it any of the spots that's directly on their storefront?
It's another great question. Primarily, it is directly in front of their storefront, or their restaurant, because it's this wait staff being able to get to the parklet. What the city has tried to do is that if it is taking space from a loading zone, is to relocate the loading zone. That has been somewhat challenging with the amount of parklets. And I've got a map in here that kind of talks through the approximate locations of the licensed parklets currently on the blocks. But some they're supposed to be in metered spaces because it's much easier to what we call bag them, and then they're not in operation, and then the parklet can be built. But then a loading zone should be relocated as a loading zone is used by it's used for any commercial use. So it's maybe the one in front of Foundry can also be used by Elm Street Tap Room, by Diesel, by Mike's. And so if a chunk is taken out of that, we lose that curve.
Thank you.
Cool. So And again, if some of you already know this, and my apologies for this being, news, you're like, yes, we already know there's tons of double parking on now, but if it's not, I'm just gonna kind of walk through the story of it. Challenges with the current parking regulations. There is not a loading zone that's long enough to accommodate a lot of trucks, and we showed an example photo where we've just seen a significant amount of trucks use this stretch at all different times of day. It's at peak times as well, but there's no actual safe space for those trucks to go. As we already discussed, the 30-minute spots don't seem to encourage the frequent turnover and can be challenging to enforce. The dedicated ride sharing pickup, we're not seeing it being effectively used. And there's only one accessible space in this area, but again, this is a high destination, and ensuring accessible spaces where folks really need them is a goal of the cities. And as I mentioned, the time limit loading zone doesn't account for loading needs after 5, which includes that food pickup. And the taxi stand is no longer in operation. And we probably hammer about this quite a bit in the presentation, but there's so much illegal parking. I'll get into some of the data sources that we collected to kind of describe this. But the things that we're most concerned about is the double parking. It blocks both buses, but emergency services, as well as just like safe travel. And it's tricky double parking, as it can it's not just one side. It can be on both sides at once, which this photo shows. So you actually have two lines of parked cars on your north side, the travel path, and then two lines of parked cars on the other side. This is right at that start of into the square. It blocks the 6 bus routes, the 90, that's the one I was forgetting. Okay. And then again, one of our biggest concerns is emergency services. And one interesting thing about it being specifically food demand is that the driver is leaving the vehicle. So when it's Lyfts and Ubers, and they might see the fire truck coming, they might quickly, okay, I'll go. But if the vehicle is unoccupied, that's really challenging. Here are some examples. As you can just see, just the amount of trucks in the area. Feel free to check these through a little bit more if you're interested later. This is a semi-parked, double parked, and this is actually, right next to the parked cars, but it's right in front of the crosswalk in front of the Goodwill. In the middle, we have a truck parking on both of the crosswalk, but in the designated parking area, another box truck behind it parked on the other crosswalk. This is blocking all the access for those crosswalks as well as any visibility. And just another double parked passenger vehicle. One thing I want to share with you is what are all the ways that we can understand what's the context. One of that is looking at ticket violations, which again are only issued if the parking control officer is there to issue them. It's really tricky. They cover 200 miles of streets. And this is just, 2 blocks. But just you can see the amount of violations over the last couple of years. Meter violations are one thing, and that's often if it's not paid or if someone's overrun it. The biggest concerns for us are the double parked and in the bus stops. And again, if someone's parked in the bus, it prevents the bus from being able to pull over safely and someone to get on safely and prevents accessible boarding. Yeah.
Can I ask about the 2024 to date number? Because we're like about halfway through the year, so I'm surprised that I would have thought it would be like maybe around half of has double parking improved?
No,
or
that's actually a great question. My apologies. We provided this data at a February traffic commission meeting, and I haven't updated the ticket violation data. So I can do that afterwards and resend the PDF.
But your sense is that it's about the same.
Yeah, this was of February of this year.
And is this just for this section of Elm?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so again, this is just violations. So one thing that's really interesting that you might have heard about is that Somerville is piloting a new tool called a safety stick. This is kind of the first automated enforcement on public streets in Massachusetts. There are specific regulations around automated enforcement in our state, but they were able to work out that this could work. And we piloted it last summer between July 1st and August 10th, specifically at the bus stop and at the crosswalks outside the Burn. And so there was some of the data that we collected of, how many incidents of illegal parking. So this data, it reads in a couple different ways. So just so you know, from the 4 rows, we saw what was so interesting is that 42% of those instances of illegal parking were 90 seconds. They're such short trips. And then again, your next big chunk is between 3 and 10 minutes. We did have an outstanding one, which is someone then parked in the bus stop for an hour and 8 minutes, which still blows our mind. But, and then again, just in that 6-week time, there were 420 incidences. One thing that's cool is that safety stick is actually now operational and issuing tickets as of late May. And if you walk the street, you'll see there's actually signage that says notice automated enforcement. Our goal is not to ticket people, our goal is to make it safe. And we're hoping that that kind of tool will help with that. This might be a little challenging to read, so please feel free to check it through, but I'm gonna walk us through the data. Mobility and parking actually captured 72 hours of video footage for these 2 blocks in late February and early March. We were able to review 20 hours of video footage. As you can imagine, reviewing video footage can take a bit of time. So we try to focus on the kind of peak times as well as when meters are in operations. You can see those time brackets in the table below or to the right. But what I wanted to highlight that in these 28 hours, we found over 500 instances of either double parking on the crosswalk or parking, sorry, right in front of it, blocking visibility, or parking in the bus stop. We didn't account for meter violations or things like that. It was truly just a safety concern. We found that this was so illegal parking of this time was happening every 3 minutes or every 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And that kind of feels like 18 times an hour. Obviously, there's different times, and you can see in the kind of evening time, we see the most egregious illegal parking. The average amount of time these vehicles were illegally parked were about 3 minutes and 40 seconds. So very fascinating for just a very short period of time. If anyone has any questions about that, we're happy to dig in. I also just shared some example photos of what that video footage looks like for just like if you're interested. As you can see, there's a lot of it's trucks. In the left bottom corner, there's a truck parked in the bus stop doing unloading. And then in the ones to the side, you see vehicles double parked.
Did we see the loading zone empty, but a double parked truck somewhere else?
Occasionally, it was interesting. We didn't mark this, so I'm gonna draw from like what we debriefed about, is that oftentimes when there was open curb space, most people would move into it safely. There were some of your egregious ones, like this U-Haul that parked right in front of Goodwill because they didn't want to find somewhere else to bring their donations. The top left corner where you see the semi, we discovered that it delivers to Starbucks, and we spoke with them, and it's their slow time, even though it's the peak time in the square. And so they often get their dairy delivery at that time. And, but so it was kind of a mix, but I would say more often than not, folks would try to pull in safely. It was really at your peak times, as well as, we saw some more of it sometimes in specific areas. So there was a huge chunk kind of by Anna Taqueria, just a high demand and a lot of double parking there. But then, yeah, it just changed in different parts. And this is not to blame any of the specific ones, we're really just trying to understand the context. Well, I just have a couple others, and maybe if you all want to check this out in your own time in the presentation, we really just wanted to pull a bunch of data sources, but along with what we looked at, there's also the 301s the city receives. And obviously this pops up quite a bit as a safety concern in the area. So just really quick, this is approximate locations of parklets. So some of them are metered spaces, some of them are unloading. And these are what are licensed. So, and this isn't currently in, but it could, but it also just depends on if they go forward with that this year. And what's not pictured is that, when we spoke to Dragon Pizza, they often get their loading in the back, but in the parklet season, they put a parklet there. So again, that changes where that loading can occur. So after all of that, I wanted to just bring together, what are we thinking? And one idea we had was to test out for approximately 12 months, way more loading zones. See if it works, make them long enough that more trucks could pull into them. A standard loading zone in the city is approximately 40 feet. It's not long enough for those types of trucks, but it doesn't look like we can kind of halt that type of delivery at this time. So how do we make space for it? It does mean reducing metered parking. It's about 8 spaces of metered parking removed from the Chester to Day Street. But we are thinking of adding 2 meters where that former rideshare location was. And then on the Chester to Grove Street section, from like the Burn into Dragon Pizza, it's approximately 5 meters removed for loading space. And then 1 meter repurposed for an accessible spot, and we wanted to propose moving the accessible spots near the curb cuts to crosswalk. So maybe I'll just pause there for a moment. We also just want to share that this is a test. One thing that's really interesting about curb use is we don't entirely know what's going to work. Curb use has so dramatically changed in the last couple of years, but we're not comfortable with the status quo. But we don't think this will totally resolve the situation. We just want to try something to improve safety. We are looking at some quick build improvements to prevent some parking on the crosswalks, but maybe I'll pause there just specifically on the parking proposal.
I have a quick question and then I see Christopher's hand. So the bus stop here looks the same length as in the current situation. Is that intentional? Because I know you mentioned that it was a very short bus stop as it stands.
It is. It was one thing we've been thinking through. Ultimately, it would be better to extend it. We're also always working with the MBT on like where are the best locations for bus stops, and there's sometimes been, do we move? Currently it's far side, does that make sense? Or do we extend it? With it being a crosswalk, that bus can overhang the crosswalk temporarily. The limiting thing is that there is pavement markings currently that demarcate that bus stop. So sometimes having the signage and the bus stop like markings not match, and with this being a quicker rollout. But it's something totally on the table, and we're not, not opposed to changing.
Christopher.
Yeah, I guess you had mentioned that there wasn't any way to stop certain deliveries there. Is there any option of the city saying to businesses that, or to delivery companies, that they should not be bringing in trucks of certain size, or, saying trucks of this size are not allowed on Elm Street, or to have deliveries of that and redirecting to somewhere else? Because an 18-wheeler does not belong delivering to storefronts.
Yeah, it's been a really challenging thing. So Christopher, I just want to make sure, does the city have any kind of jurisdiction to restrict that type of delivery?
Yes.
Or are we trying to communicate to the business? Because it is very challenging.
Yeah, it is 2 different options. That there's, you can go with the stick of saying, can the city say, no, these trucks aren't allowed on certain streets or or wherever, or is there a forum with these businesses and both the delivery and the receiving companies to say, hey, any kind of incentive to use smaller vehicles, which would be an improvement for safety, not just when they're blocking traffic, but for their entire time in the city.
Yeah, it's something that overall we're really interested in pursuing. It is very challenging at this time to institute that kind of restriction. And I'm happy to bring back some more of the details on that. It's kind of a larger traffic regulation issue that also kind of is sometimes very challenging for just a municipality to employ. We have actually been trying to speak one-on-one with the businesses to understand more of what are their delivery options, what are the maneuverability in that. Some have more control over them than the others. It is really challenging because a lot of businesses have told us they don't have control over their deliveries. And so they're just operating with either third-party contractors. So it's very challenging to restrict that movement right now.
Especially for the businesses on the south side. If there's any way to Be Fresh, I think, used Chester Street. The businesses in the Davis Square Plaza, including the Starbucks, could use not Chester, but the one behind it, near the municipal parking in the back.
Yeah, the one that kind of goes back behind the plaza.
Yeah.
Was the reduction in the number of metered parking spaces, how much, I guess, ability does the city have to also increase the price of those metered parking spaces, potentially, maybe like throughout, like, I actually don't know what the policies are around. Can you make it more expensive to park in Davis Square than in other parts of the city, or vary that by time of day to sort of open up spaces, if theoretically, maybe reduce some of the demand through pricing?
Yeah, at this time, we don't have that ability for price increases in, parking, like price parking, so if it's permits or if it's meters. It actually has to be a proposal sent to the mayor's office, and she signed it off, and I believe there is another step, and I forget, but it is often related to a full citywide increase rather than a specific area. But it's something that was actually talked about a lot in the parking study, as we know that pricing changes the demand. If it's okay, can I ask? I'm curious where you're thinking of pricing the parking. Do you think, or what makes you interested in increasing the parking?
Oh, with just the thought that if you're losing some spaces, people might have an easier time finding parking in other parts of Davis Square, if parking was more expensive in that neighborhood. But like, if you have the ability to vary it.
Yeah.
In certain neighborhoods or by certain times of day, if that's a lever that's available to you.
Yeah.
But I mean, in general, it's easier to find a parking space if parking is more expensive.
Okay, it's got a lot of hands. I'm gonna go to Steve online and then we'll get Krista.
Yes, thanks. I'm wondering, is there an awareness issue around the loading zone 5-minute rule? Because I'd hate for, lots more loading zones, which might work here, but lots more loading zones, but the food pickup people don't realize they can stop there for 5 minutes, so they're still double parking. So I'm wondering, like, in terms of signage, is it clear enough that this 5-minute rule exists?
Thanks, Steve. And actually, might bring us to our next slide. The city has looked at redesigning the slide. We wanted to include iconography, especially, again, it can be challenging if the signage is all words. Can we communicate through images? This is something we've been testing out. You might see some in Union Square and Ball Square and on Broadway and Central Hill. And one thing we're also looking to do is create a postcard, and some of the businesses have said they would staple it to the takeout bags to help communicate, as well as we developed some posters hoping they would hang them up in the businesses to help spread the word on this type of regulation.
Go ahead, Kristen.
I would definitely wanted to second what Carol was saying regarding the parking. I definitely seen it both, like, for friends and family trying to visit. Sometimes during peak hour, it's at 100% capacity, which is kind of the worst situation where people end up searching for it and you get people just driving around blocks. I've seen situations where just walking through, I see people circling in the Day Street lot. It's like, it's really not good for anyone in the area. So it does seem to be at certain times of day, especially on weekends, there's a pricing issue where it's not in line with demand. But another kind of different question, but related to the crosswalks. Technically, how many lanes is Elm Street there? Because it's very inconsistent in different areas how cars will drive. With some of the parklets, there's certain areas which only one car can really pass, and then there's other areas with certain crosswalks, 2 cars will be driving, and it becomes a very dangerous situation where one will stop, the other one doesn't.
Yeah, so in about 2021, the city moved to make Elm Street 1 lane. And those pavement markings have quite faded. So when they were thinking about, do we pave those back? It was actually in response to allowing parklets, and those can move, more into the roadway if you narrow the street. And so you might have seen there was if you kind of go back in Google Maps, if you like put in Elm Street, I'll show you that original configuration. But it's confusing. And we know that sometimes it feels like it's 2 lanes, it's 1 lane, and it's much narrower at those curb extensions, but 2 cars can still squeeze through. So one thing we've been thinking about is, can we utilize flex posts to narrow that again. Especially, you know, as we have parklets in, you know, you can kind of continue that line.
I think that would also feel easier if you're on a bike, you know, that you're not fighting against two cars rather than one.
And the flex posts are always nice for emergency vehicles, because if need be, they can just
Yeah.
go over them.
Barbara, I see your hand on screen.
Oh, Barbara, you're muted.
I think I was muted because I'm actually going to speak in favor of parking, which is not at all my normal stance as a person who doesn't even have a car. On Wednesdays, because of the farmer's market, there's very, very little parking anywhere. And I wondered if it's possible to make some sort of fewer deliveries or something that acknowledges the fact that that municipal lot is out of commission on that day.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to look in that, and we're trying to, we're kind of starting a whole dialogue with Davis Square businesses, but there's a kind of grassroots organization kind of starting, but also just one-on-one. Just trying to understand what types of deliveries do occur. We also were thinking through more educational material about the 4 other lots in Davis Square. Or Buena Vista lot, which is that one just on the other side of the theater. It has a parking counter, and so, you know, can we encourage folks to check that out when we have these other ones taken up with, you know, like the farmer's market, as well as the one that's behind the old Rite Aid. How do we kind of show folks all these other options? There's 2 on Grove Street, but they're all kind of tucked away in different corners.
Yeah.
But that's a great point, and something that we are trying to look at utilization of those lots, especially when you demand both the farmer's market as well as the flea market that occurs on the Sundays in the summer.
Has there been any thought about moving one or either of those to park spaces like Seven Hills Park?
Oh,
which I know isn't a flat space, but it would, you know, again, I can't believe I'm supporting, you know, more parking, but
It's kind of interesting, right? But when you get into it, you're like, oh, what about this? And it's all about parking management. I always think about it. No, we haven't, but that's something I can definitely talk to the folks that help coordinate and facilitate the markets.
Cool, well, I wanna be mindful of our time. Okay, Joel, you're gonna be the last comment for this section.
Hi, yeah, so if we're removing that many parking spaces already for the metered spots, like, what would be the difference of just getting rid of all of the metered spaces on the street? Isn't there a plan to like pedestrianize this whole space anyway? And
Yes.
there's a lot of people that would, if there's a couple spaces there and most of them have been removed, they might be like, oh, I'll come back around, and they're more likely to circle, keep looking for parking. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 2 great questions. Yes, there's a longer term plan to pedestrianize, and I think there was a really great discussion at PTAC a couple of months ago about Davis Square commercial area plan. One thing we think about, instead of kind of blanket changing all of the regulations, we do try to think of uses nearby. So sometimes the meters are more helpful when they convert to parklets, as well as like if there's more sit-down restaurants, maybe there's more desire for longer term. There's a hair salon at the ones that are kind of closer to Mike's, where we've kept some meters. But again, we're really looking to you all also for advice, like, you know, is this repurposing helpful, is it not? And it also, we're testing it, so there's other things we could test over that time and measure and evaluate.
I think something I'd be interested in, although I don't want to take necessarily time getting detailed. But like, are we thinking we might write a letter about any, or I'd be interested in knowing, because it's a pilot, like, what are the metrics you're gonna use to like determine success? Is it the incidence of parking violations? Is there anything else that you're gonna be collecting data on over the course of the pilot?
Yeah, one thing we want to do is, if we're able to move forward with a pilot, is at approximately 6 months in, do another video study. We're still working with businesses. You know, there's a lot in repurposing or removing parking. we like to call it repurposing, especially because we're not actually removing any of this. But to some, right, removing meters can feel like it could harm or negatively impact. So if we're able to move forward, which again, if that's something too that PTAC is interested in, you know, sharing either support or questions or, you know, we'd love to hear. Approximately is going to conduct another video study and compare that data and see if we see a similar instances, do we see an increase, a decrease, and use that as one way to evaluate. We are also using the automated ticketing.
I'd be interested in, I'd be interested in also seeing like the, not just, I don't remember, like the video study you did was like primarily like on the street. Maybe interested in knowing like what the impacts on adjacent streets are as well. Like if you're moving the problem, like now that you saw, now you see like an increase in double parking on all the other places, like that would be interesting as well. It's like what happens, what the spillover effects may be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Kate, in terms of what would be helpful to you and the city at this moment, it seems like, you know, that this is the proposal that you're making. So what is helpful for us in terms of like providing feedback, or is it like just making sure that we're all kind of paying attention in Davis Square, like as we're moving through it, or maybe like you coming back, well, you'll be here, but presenting again in like 6 months? What do you think is a good way forward for this project?
We really appreciate your thoughtfulness in our proposals. So if it is something that the committee would be interested in, we would like some kind of, you know, consensus on, you know, we like this, or we have questions about this, or, no, we actually want you to explore something else. We also don't ask a lot about parking regulations. And we were just kind of curious to see, like, what are your thoughts around some of those uses? I think one of the goals in the annual report was to follow up on the parking study. And so it was kind of an opportunity to do that, but in a kind of concentrated location. However, if that's not of an interest or a priority right now, that's totally okay. This is the pilot test, and it's not such a big project, as we know, compared to some of the other things we asked for your advice on. So if it's of interest, we would love some kind of, you know, comment on it, but also understand if it's not a priority.
And what timeline are you looking for that?
So we are looking to go to the city's traffic commission, who approves or disapproves of the city's different traffic regulation proposals later this summer. We don't have a specific date yet. So anything maybe in the next 2 months or so. And it can be specific about the proposal, but also it could be requests for the evaluation throughout the test, which we're looking at approximately 12 months.
Is there any interest among committee members in maybe doing kind of a deeper dive into the proposal that Kate has presented for us today, and maybe kind of cohering some of the minutes that have been taken into a more substantial letter that we can provide to the city?
Yes.
Great.
I think we should write a letter, and we should get together, maybe an extra meeting. Let's put an ad hoc subcommittee on this.
Great, you're on
And
engineering
we could
evaluation.
just, you know, debate among ourselves, see what we're gonna write, and review in the next meeting.
Do you want to take the lead on?
Yeah, I
organizing
can take
that? And thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
So for our, just a disclaimer to our guests, the next section of our meeting is gonna be like inside baseball, just like talking amongst new members, and hearing like questions and onboarding stuff. So you're obviously more than welcome to stay. But it will not be as exciting as parking regulations.
If some of the guests might not be interested in this part of really signing up, would there be any sense, are we allowed to move public comment earlier in case people came to make comments but don't want to sit through the inside baseball, please?
Totally. Has anybody, I love baseball. Awesome. Has anybody come to make public comment on any topic that they wish? Yes, Karen.
Hi, I just wanted to make a comment on the parking proposal. I think it's a great idea. I guess I wanted to ask Kate, is Kate still in the room?
Yeah.
Is it just those blocks? Is it not extending a little bit further, like to Dover or whatever? Is it just?
At this time, we didn't go further than these specific
Okay.
two blocks, but we're not restricted by it. Changing parking regulations, we can do kind of any time after going to traffic commission. We've just seen the problem really concentrated at this location.
Okay, I mean, as for just in my own, this is just my own experience. I feel like that block is also bad. That's all. But I'm really glad to see more loading zones. As somebody who uses that bus stop a lot, it's mostly already the bus stop is always used as a loading zone. And I mean, Be Fresh hasn't been there in months. H Mart is moving in, and like it's going to be used as a loading zone, whether it's denoted or not. Except I love the idea that you have like a specific loading zone right next to the bus stop. So, but yeah, I think it's anyway, I just really like the your proposal and wanted to mention it.
Karen.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, seeing no other public comment. Our final minutes together, is really just a space for our new members to, ask questions, about any of the onboarding materials that you received, or just the committee in general, processes, anything that you might be wondering about. Also a space to talk about what else would be helpful in your onboarding process, whether it's materials, or one idea that has been thrown around by a few different people is like a buddy system. So like pairing up newer members with longer term members, and just like meeting and being in touch and, you know, providing someone who's like a point person, just in case you have questions as they come up, versus feeling like you have to send, you know, an email to like me every single time you have a question, which I'm very happy to receive. But also like, I should not be the only one who's, you know.
By default, Alessandra is everybody's buddy, so please spread the.
I hope you see me as everyone's buddy, but it would also be nice for other people to be buddies. So curious about your feedback on that kind of idea. And then one other idea that came up in officers, our meeting. Oh, actually, this might be a good piece of information for new members. The officers, myself, Carol, and Vitor, we meet once a month with our mobility team, our liaisons, to both set the agenda, but also talk about other things related to transportation in the city and other things related to stuff that PTAC is doing. So if there are ever any things that you want us to bring to one of those meetings or ideas you have for the agenda, please get in touch. They are on the shared calendar, those meetings. You can see when they are.
And they're typically like 2 weeks ahead, like in the middle. So.
Yes, so the next one is gonna be on, not July 4th.
Yeah, let's reschedule that.
Probably the week after that, but usually they're on like the first Thursday of every month. Anyhow. There was something else I wanted to say. Oh, yes, one other idea that we had at our last meeting is that we could do kind of an informal session. So outside of the context of you know, one of these meetings, we could go to like a brewery, for example. And just like chat, and that could be like a good opportunity for our buddies to like, if we like the buddy system, to pair up the first time and just talk to each other. But also could be an opportunity for some more informal discussion about our subcommittee structure. Just because I think it's kind of hard to like talk in a big room about something that like kind of complex and multifaceted. So it might be cool to just like start talking about it in a more informal setting. Those are just my thoughts. What do people think? What questions do you have?
One question I have is, do all of these subcommittees on this list already exist, or are they some of these new that don't exist yet?
You're talking about the draft new subcommittees?
Yes.
None of those exist yet, although I say that. The ones that exist today are policy enforcement, which has taken on a variety of issues over the course of the time that they've existed. Engineering evaluation, which is essentially design review, just kind of rebranded to make it like clearer what it does.
Got it.
And then education and engagement is currently oversees all of our walks and public events, and like tabling sessions, as well as our newsletter and communications. So like those are broken up into two separate subcommittees in this kind of, brainstorming document. But they wouldn't necessarily have to be if people think that they make sense together.
I think last time that you also that there's some like a glossary or definitions document, and I couldn't find where it is. Like, do we have one of those? It's like, what is a floating bus stop? Right, like just very basic, so that I know the lingo.
I don't think we have one of those, but maybe.
No, I think I remember our conversation. So we
Yeah.
have a city page, which is
City
Somerville
page,
MA.gov
Yeah.
/traffic calming, all one URL. We put some definitions on there, like
Okay.
floating bus stop, clear corners, which is the restricted parking, much of the crosswalks. Try to use that as a space
Okay.
with some images, to kind of communicate what are some of these terms that we're using.
Yeah, because for me, I think that'll be helpful because you all use a lot of fancy words that I don't quite, like, I didn't know some of these terminology. I just was like, oh yeah, that yellow thing that I use on this street in front of this restaurant.
I mean, it's still that.
Can you send that URL to us?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm kind of like, I'm sending them to the Zoom, but you're not on, I'm sorry.
No, I'm happy to follow.
I have a comment about onboarding, which I thought it was great that we got like a very long document of different things to check out, to prepare, but I also felt like I would have benefited personally from this, like, sort of knowing what things I should prioritize. From reading it, I could sort of deduce what things to prioritize, but maybe having it be a little more spelled out for me. I think it's great that there's things on there like listen to 99%, yeah, listen to the Big Thing podcast, like, that's all really cool. And then it's closer to the end, so that makes sense, but I think just having it be a little more clear, like what, if there are like specific things that new members should be reading, having that be front and center before everything else would be helpful, at least for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know, from existing members, like, what do you think is kind of the stuff to prioritize, just speaking to Tim's question?
Around like kind of background on municipal transportation.
Yeah.
Planning. I mean, I would argue that everything on any list is optional. You know, so it's very tempting when you're putting together a list. It's like all of us to some degree are kind of like transportation nerds who really like reading about, I mean, I particularly am like a professional transportation nerd, but like, I think it's important, like, I think it's important that new members and all members don't feel like there's a barrier to like having valid opinions and an important perspective and the expertise you have from living in a city and like interacting here is like that's the important expertise. And like mobility staff has like, by showing up, you mean everyone start to pick up some like, oh, this is called a flex post or whatever.
Yeah.
But like calling it, you know, those yellow sticks, like, it's okay to use that language, and it's okay to speak up and be like, I don't know what a floating bus stop is. And like, that's a good like, this is meant to, so I think it's like that list is like, if you're interested and you wanna like, this is like fun stuff that if you're the kind of person that would sign up to be on this committee, you might also really enjoy reading this stuff, but I hope nobody feels like, until I've done this homework, I don't have a right to speak up in meetings or raise my hand or write a letter. Like, I think it's really important that, that everyone feels like you're already qualified to be here. And so it's sort of this eagerness to be helpful by compiling a list of resources, but also not wanting that to send a message that like, until you listen to all of this, you're not truly able to, so that's, I
Totally.
think the balance,
And that,
right?
and that might have been more on me, because I'm looking now at the email that I got from Justin last month, when he says, you may wish to review this list of onboarding resources, but I think like, from my perspective, it's like, okay, I gotta read this list of onboarding resources. Oh no, it's 6 pages long. Okay, I'm gonna just sort of like think, I'm gonna try to decide which ones are the most important things, so I'm better informed for future meetings.
Yeah, no, I mean, to Carol's point, and I really thank you for bringing this up, Tim, like, that list is more than anything intended to just like help you kind of understand like the landscape of transportation planning in the city. Just because like, that was something that, for me, when I joined this committee 2+ years ago, I was like, oh my God, there's so many people who are working on this and I don't know how they all work together. So that document is just kind of intended to like give you an overview of like who works on it in Somerville, so you're not like shocked that there's a traffic and parking like subcommittee on city council, for example, or like don't know where decisions are made. I mean, you might not know where decisions are being made because it comes from many places, but at least you have an overview of like who might be making decisions.
Totally. Cool.
One thing that I will definitely say is that you should sign up for the mobility newsletter if you haven't already. It's very useful.
Sounds good.
Yes, Barbara, I see your hand.
Just want to speak in favor of your suggestion about informal discussion, brewery, whatever. I learned more working at Carnival at the table than I did by reading a lot of those things. So I'd be in favor of that.
I think that the suggestion is modeled off, like when we were first coming out of COVID, a lot of us had never met one another in person. And we did sort of a get together at Aeronaut, and it was just really nice to, I think it helps a lot, just feeling like you know the other members of, speaking of wanting to be inclusive and everyone to feel like they're part of this, I think having met someone is really helpful for that. More so than, a lot of us joined during a time, and it was just sort of signing on to it. And what we call once a month, and so being able to feel like.
There's a +1 from Steve online for the informal get together. Is anybody opposed to? Let's put it that way. Great. Are there times that generally work for folks? Better or worse? No, just real time.
Not the third Thursday.
Yeah, great. Do people prefer weekends or like weekday evenings?
For me, a weekday would work better personally.
Cool. Is that okay for the parents in the room?
I mean, at least speaking for myself, kind of everything is moderately challenging. So, but we can make anything work with advanced notice, at least on my end.
That's good. Okay, maybe I'll send out a little scheduling poll for a weekday evening in the next month or so.
Maybe start with Thursdays, given that we know that this Thursday is free.
Yeah, great.
Oh, wait, from July 4th.
Right. And not the first Thursday.
Oh, yeah, they're all next week.
So I was thinking doing another meeting for the parking regulation discussion. Shall we do it together or separate? This might be too much.
I think that would probably make more sense separately. Like maybe work with Zach on like scheduling a engineering subcommittee and like invite anybody who wants to come to it, if that isn't too much of an imposition.
Yep,
Do you
that
want
sounds
to do
good.
before or after 4th of July? The meeting about parking regulation.
Probably after, because 4th of July is in 2 weeks. Like,
Yeah.
I did not realize that until like the quarter is about to end, guys.
Yeah.
Bananas.
Yeah, crazy. What did the year go?
I realize we're over time, but does anybody have any other burning questions about being on PTAC?
can I make just a little quick plug for how the acting secretary thing works? I've reached out to a couple of folks, including, thank you, so I don't know if this was already in the onboarding materials, but new members, I've added you to the rotation of acting secretary, so don't be surprised to hear from me. Often, I try not to do the last minute, but often it's, a day or two before. But we rotate the responsibility for taking minutes in meetings. We have enough members now that means you might be asked to take minutes like once a year. Sometimes it's a little bit more often, depending on, if someone's not available, I keep moving down the list. But you'll get an email from me every once in a while asking if you can take minutes in a meeting.
And if you become a subcommittee lead, you don't need to be secretary.
Is that
So
true? The subcommittee leads? I've been asking them.
I was not aware of that.
That's the benefit of like putting yourself out there. You get to not write minutes.
If you become a subcommittee.
Because you're already writing for the subcommittee, so it's
Oh, sure.
kind of
Well,
double meetings.
That does seem
if
fair.
that's a policy, I have not been following that policy, and then you will get asked if more than once a year in that case, depending on how many subcommittees we end up with. But yes, currently I do not ask the officers other than myself. I do put myself into rotation, just because it seems a little thing fair. But should I not be asking the subcommittee?
I don't think we've ever discussed that
Okay.
before, but I mean, it's something that we could talk about, along with our subcommittee structure. Yeah. The last thing I just want to get folks' opinion on, and then I will let everybody go home. But what do people think about this like buddy system thing? Is that something that is like meaningful to you, attractive to you? Would it be like not helpful at all to you? What do you think about that?
It would be helpful. I think we should try it.
Yeah, I agree.
Very simple.
Yeah.
Great.
Unanimous, it seems.
What is a good way, I mean, should we use this informal gathering as an opportunity to pair up or try to do it beforehand? We could just do like a random thing if folks are like comfortable with me just like throwing all our names into like an automatic generator.
That might be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
That's probably-
Yeah.
It's probably the quickest way to do it.
Yeah.
Do we want to make sure we have one senior member and one new member paired
Yes.
up?
Yes, I'll find an app that can do that. Random generate. Okay, great. Thank you all so much for a great second meeting with all of our new members. We are next meeting in July on the 18th. So see you all then, if not before then. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.